July 5th, super hot outside. It's the entry to our house. Sweet almond verbena lines the entryway. This flower smells amazing. And as you enter, a lot of different textures, a lot of different depth. I got the spikies in the back to add depth. And you notice it's different colored and everything else. This is, I haven't watered this garden, though you see a hose right now. I'm watering one plant that's having a little trouble. I haven't watered this garden in 2 years. I water this plant, it's new, and I water plants that are new. I'll water them for the first summer, get them through the first summer, but after the first year, they're on their own. You know, the esperanza and these, I haven't watered in 3 years. These are only 3 years old, so I watered them 2 years ago. These, same thing, they're 3 years old. I watered them a couple years ago. I haven't watered them since then. Pretty amazing xeric garden, and the amount of wildlife that comes here. Hummingbirds. You can see the textures with the bamboo muhly. It's just a real pleasure to walk through. And right adjacent to it is the outdoor room, where we have all the trees trimmed up so you can sit underneath, and it's very private, as you can see. You know, this is kind of an experiment to see if I could get these succulents to grow in the shade. And talk about a texture difference. How about xeric shade succulents with a xeric fern? The fern is wavy scaly cloak fern, right next to some Texas Betony. You know, I'm not convinced. This tree has grown a lot more than I thought it would. It's growing almost 18 inches a year. These oaks are really putting on some speed since I've started putting compost under the tree. And I think that I might have to move the Betony next year. But regardless, that's Texas Betony. And it's great because early hummingbirds that are looking for hummingbird food will find this. It's one of the first true hummingbird plants that they're looking for, that the scouts are looking for. Walking into the garden, I love this four-nerve daisy, Humanoxus. The four-nerve daisy is a Pecos Valley plant, and it requires, I think, 6 to 8 inches of rain per year. So here it thinks it's in heaven. And it blooms, 2 years ago it was blooming January 1st. Last year it was blooming in February. This stuff blooms almost all year round. It'll take a break in the middle of the summer, like August-ish. You can see a lot of it starting to take a break over here. But it's almost always in bloom. And it borders the Gregg's mistflower and the lamb's ear back in the background. These are different kinds of milkweed, and this is for butterfly food. It's one thing to have a butterfly garden, and that's what this is, a butterfly and a hummingbird garden. It's another thing entirely to have food for them to stay for. So that's what this is. You can see all this rocky area here. Well, you'll hear me say, if you look at my other videos, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. This didn't work right here. This worked, that's one, and then these worked. So these are tuberosa milkweeds. They're some of the most temperamental and some of the hardest to grow. I've got several of them growing here right now. I can't believe, I think I've got 8 total, maybe more. They kind of branch out funny, so it's hard to tell if they're 1 or 2 unless you touch the stems. But suffice to say, I'm starting to get some. And this is an antelope horn milkweed. The one, I had an extra from some others that I planted, and so I just planted it over here. And it was a marker for all of these tuberosa seeds I planted that not a single one of them came up. So it is very finicky, really finicky plant. This is a wet year. You would think if they're going to come up, and I even assisted, like I said, I don't water. Well, I watered this area when it needed it, but it just didn't work out. And the theme I'm going for here is definitely my favorite combination is Pride of Barbados and Esperanza. I love that combination. It just brings in the eyes. It just captures your attention. And then what it does for the wildlife too. There's so many bumblebees. I never knew there were so many different kinds of bumblebees until I put these things in. The plumbago, this is something I think will work. These are kind of shading most of the plumbagos here, and this gets shade at about 3 p.m. because of the tree. So I'm hoping that these will shade the plumbago enough. These are all first-year plumbagos, so that I can have something growing as a large ground cover. Again, to keep out the Bermuda. If you watch my videos, that's my biggest problem, keeping out the Bermuda. This is tropical sage here. I love this stuff. I'm growing some in the back. I'm going to transplant up here. And the tropical sages, you don't have one up here? Yeah, I got one still up there in the deep, deep shade. One over there in the deep, deep shade. But this tree's grown so much that these are now in almost entire shade. So the tropical sage, I'm just going to let it creep around. And if it gets in areas where I don't want it, like for example this one, then I'll just move it over here, back over to the mothership. So this is a big deal for me this year. You can see here I've got stringers of St. Augustine grass coming in. The St. Augustine is pretty easy to control. The Bermuda is an entirely different story. It doesn't come in, it goes underneath, right? These are real easy. You just pick it up, pull it back, no problem. But the Bermuda just keeps coming, keeps coming, keeps coming. So I wanted to bring plants here that are going to get bigger than the Bermuda. This is Mexican Mint Marigold, and I've got a whole bunch of it here. This year, I'm going to have to help it along because these are new transplants. I didn't put them in until the spring. They're going to bloom in the fall, but they're still not going to get big until next year. Next year, especially if we have a warm winter, and these things will, you know, if it gets to like 28, then they'll go away. We haven't had a winter that warm in a long time. So if we have a warm winter where these things make it through, they're going to be massive next year. And even if they don't, they'll be big by the end of the year. Regardless, in a couple of years, I'm not going to have to worry about the Bermuda over here. There's one lavender. This plant is only here because deer hate lavender. And I'm hoping that eventually they don't like Mexican Mint Marigold either. They don't like the smells. And I've noticed that they try not to touch these herbs. When I'll sit out here at night sometimes, and I'll just watch the deer, and I've noticed that they won't touch these herbs. So I had more lavender, but it's dying. Lavender hates any attention. This is probably too much attention for it right here. It's probably hating life right now. It's very temperamental plant if it doesn't get what it wants. So I'm really hoping that this hangs in there, but if it doesn't, we're going to put another Mexican Mint Marigold or two right there. And you can see the garden. That's a new esperanza. The last one died. This one is 2 years old. This esperanza, this is the third year, has always bloomed late, and it's very frustrating. All of the other esperanzas are blooming. This one's blooming late. And yeah, I won't even go into what I've tried, but I've tried stuff. So you can see the big long border though of Mexican Mint Marigold. That's really all the work that I did, was creating these borders. Over here as well, Mexican bush sage, Mexican bush sage, Mexican bush sage, bush sage, bush sage. This bush sage right here was really not looking that good this morning. So trying to give it a little bit of water right now. And you know, this stuff after the first year, I won't have to do anything to it. But you can see the border here. You can see it comes right up, right there, right? And then right up here. And I have a big bulb of it at the top, a big bulb of this down here. These will bloom at the same time, these borders, the Mexican bush sage and the Mexican Mint Marigold. So I think that this will really look nice. You know, this was a trial year to see if I could leave these grasses here. I can't. The grasses aren't thick enough. The Bermuda grows up through the middle of them. So the Bermuda will obviously grow right up through them on the border. I can't do that. So I'm going to have to move these grasses. I think I'm going to move them over here with this other grass, so I'll just bunch them all together. And same thing with the Mexican feather grass up there. I'm going to take the Mexican feather grass and move it back here because it likes a little bit more shade too. And then right here I'll just close that in with some more Mexican bush sage this fall. So that is the front yard garden. I love sitting out here, just watching the hummingbirds. Well, here's the second part of it. You know, I really wanted, again, I didn't want to use thorns. I wanted to use large leaf plants that could be accents, but they had no thorns. This is a spineless palm, a sabol minor, dwarf palmetto, which is native to Texas. If you've ever seen the movie Predator, They filmed it in Palmetto State Park, and because they needed a tropical looking area, and this is it. This is tropics. Looks very tropical. I will have more eventually, but I just needed placeholders right now until I get 4 more around it. They'll go. Here we have the black and blue sage. I'm really just trying to propagate this. It's not going to look good this year. I put it in fall of last year, maybe even summer. I put it in late, and you can see a bunch of it is pinned down. I've got a bunch of small ones, a bunch of little ones. Those are branches that I pinned down, and I'm hoping those branches will grow so that next year I'll have 7 plants here, and then they'll look big. This one, to give you an idea of what it looks like, this is the native form, so it's kind of tall and lean, so I want them really crowded in right there. This is a white mistflower, and it's also known as fragrant mistflower, or euphorium, something, episporium, something like that. Anyway, I'm sure the botanists are just screaming at me right now. You're saying it wrong, but I never went to botany. I've never taken botany. So this is a white mistflower, and also known as fragrant mistflower. Blooms in the fall. Apparently it just kind of looks lame like this. This is the first year until fall, and then it goes nuts. So I'm really looking forward to the going nuts part. You can also see my favorite sage over here, the purple sage. The Mystic Spires sage blooms from the time it can until the time it can't. I mean, it is just constantly blooming. It doesn't take but about 4 weeks to get from plant to bloom. I mean, it's not this big when it starts blooming, but it doesn't take but about 4 weeks to get there. And so it's amazing. I love this sage. It's one of my favorite. You can see that I'm growing a whole bunch down here, a bunch on the bottom. I find this is the easiest way to grow new plants. You know, the mom plant kind of helps them out until they root, and then you cut them off, and voila, you've got a plant. I probably won't cut them until like fall. I probably won't plant them until fall. But in Texas, we have 2 planting seasons, and October 1st starts actually what I think is to be the best planting season. It's not as hot, and you get longer growing time before the summer. They get an additional 6 months of growth before the heat comes in. This is by far my favorite sage. I can't believe it's still blooming. It is really enjoying it here. This is a Jerusalem sage, and this is one of the reasons I got into sage gardens. I just love that flower. Just beautiful. The symmetry. I just love the way it looks. It's almost compartmentalized. This sage garden is just alive at night. If you come out here with a flashlight at night, and I see several parasitic wasps actually over here, if you zoom in right over there, I think you'll see some parasitic wasps on the top of the leaves. But it's just alive at night. I mean, it's moths and stuff chasing them, and it's pretty awesome to see. In daytime, it's not so much. This is more the Mexican bush sage. Kind of a theme here. I love that plant. This is flame Acanthus, and I've got this right up front here because this is a sign for all of the hummingbirds. I have 4 of them here. Well, 5 of them there's a couple I've let grow, and they're very prosperous. I mean, they grow very well. But everyone said to cut it. I've had this one for 5 years now. It was one of the first plants I planted because it's the #1 hummingbird plant for sun in Texas. This is what they look for. So as they're coming through South Texas, this is what they seek. So it's familiar to them as they're migrating up north. They see this, they know what it is, they're familiar with it, and I see them. I sit right there. See my seat? I see them right here. They come right to it before they come to anything else. So the flame Acanthus, I'm going to maybe put bush sage or flame Acanthus there. I haven't decided. But either way, you can see that after 5 years of no cutting, it's time to trim. I think you have to trim them every 4 or 5 years. I think that's what it is. This is just kind of woody, and a lot of it's dead, and it's mostly evergreen. You come over here, you know what they normally look like. See that? It's a much different looking plant versus the woody dead thing over here, right there. So I want them to look like that every year. Otherwise, I don't want them because they're kind of nasty. Gulf Muhly. Gulf Muhly just shine with pink or purple in the fall, and these are just not a good spot for being able to block out the Bermuda, so I've got to get rid of them. This plant here, this is a Flowery Senna, and this thing is about to get killed. I'm about to cut it down. It's been here 2 years, and I've gotten about 6 blooms out of it. You can see it's starting. It's really trying. It's really trying to bloom, but it just won't bloom. And if it doesn't like it here, well, my compost pile will love this thing. This is prime time real estate in my garden. This is a focal point. I bought this plant as a 3 gallon, I think, maybe a 1 gallon even. It was small. And I bought it because as you're driving past my house, you will see this spot. So I wanted something that got nice and yellow, and it's just not working. But I've got a lot of stuff I can put here. So I think this thing, I might give it 1 more year, maybe. I'm not even sure. I'll give it till October at least. But it's supposed to be a summer flowering thing. And you can see it's trying. It's trying. I let it go the first year because deer got to it. Deer nipped it back. The second year they nipped back a couple of branches, but it wasn't that bad. But this is taking a prime real estate. It's got to go. Little coreopsis, I can't believe it's still growing. The only reason I don't plant more is because the deer eat off all the flowers. So I know if I planted a whole garden of them that they'd just be in heaven. And all of these plants are deer resistant. The deer don't eat them. They don't like them. This is a green cloud Texas sage. I've got several Texas sages. I love that plant. And this is one of my least favorite ones. I've decided I like the silver aspect of the Texas sage. This just has a slightly different color than the background. Slightly different color in the background, you see? I mean, you can't really see, it's kind of dark. But, yeah, just not my favorite. I do love the Texas sage. I like the flowers. I like the random bloom times, but not necessarily this one. Over here, got some Salvia Gregii. So this is lining them up. Border. These are all cuttings from the same plant that I grew. And so these are first year plants, which is the reason they look kind of scraggly. This one was not first year. This is not first year. That's not first year. Those 3 did so well. So you can see what they look like second year, right? This is what they kind of look like second year. That's going to get big. That's going to get big. That's going to get big. We'll have a nice big border of red here. You can see they're kind of in bloom right now. And I like them against the yucca rostrada in the background here. I love that look of the red, purple, kind of a fiery look. Love the way they move in the wind. So you see what I mean? That's prime real estate. I could put a couple Texas sages right there that I really like and create a pathway of Texas sage there. So this Flowery Senna has got to flower or go. And the last thing, I guess, is the plumbago, standing cypress, which we've talked about, the plumbago. This guy better grow or die. He's not in a spot that I even care for, so I'm gonna let the xylosma have him. These 2 I've been trimming up. This is gonna be my pathway coming through here. And so you can see that's eventually going to be all plants. And this will be the pathway through, because you got to have paths to come through, work on this stuff, right? So I can come in here, go this way. I can work on stuff in here. I can get over there. I can get back in here. So this is the path. Cool.